Okay, we're going to do a video here to show another handy use for the handy dandy Bob board. This is the Pick Bob Focus version 6 from picklist.com, and we are going to be using it with the ubiquitous Uno and with a little cheap 2x16 LCD display and some switches just to make a little front panel for the Uno. Very low cost little project here. I'm going to mount the LCD panel onto the Uno. Basically goes on like this. There's a row of pins right there that we'll be soldering in another row of pins here and here that then connect to the outside connectors on the Arduino, and then the LCD panel drops into place right here. You can kind of see the little outline of it. I'm actually going to set that up on a set of pin headers to raise it up a little bit, because for this particular application I want to be able to get to these headers underneath the LCD panel later on, and that also brings it kind of up to the same level as the switches, which will be dropping into place here. There'll be a row of those across the bottom. And so with that said, I guess we can go ahead and get started. First thing is to put in this row header here. And like I say, that is going to just raise the LCD panel up a little bit. These are basically just a break-off bar of them. So you make sure that you know how many of them you want, and then just use a pair of bias cutters to snap them off at that point, hopefully. Tough little sucker. And hopefully I got the right number of pins there. I think I did. Come on, there we go. Yeah. So that goes all the way across that one row right there. And then into the parts box for the ever handy row of snap-off connectors, which will be going here. And again, we just break that off at the point that we need it. Hopefully that's the same number. Looks good. And that goes in on the back of the board, like so. And we can start soldering. Using my favorite soldering iron, the ancient but lovely wall isotip that my father gave to me when I was a kid, and I have had forever. And excellent quality solder from Keister. So we're just gonna solder our keisters. Okay, so tip looks fairly clean. Get the pin and the pad hot. Drop a little bit of solder on one pin. Let that harden, and then we'll check and make sure that we have it in there correctly, that it's not crooked or out of alignment. Once we have one pin soldered in place, then we can go ahead and solder the rest. Whenever you're doing this kind of soldering, it's a good idea to jump around a little bit on the pads, because that black piece of plastic right there is not terribly strong, and you can definitely have problems with it melting, especially when you're using the cheap stuff from China or wherever. quick visual inspection. Focus. Just to make sure that everything looks okay. That's good. And then we can move on again to soldering this header into place. And again, it's just a matter of getting it turned over to the back, soldering down one pin to make sure that that is good, and checking the alignment and position. That's a little bit crooked, so what I've got is just one finger on the back here. Go ahead and heat that up, and just by feel adjust the position. Adjust the position some more. There we go. Get that more or less straight there. And once we have that one pin in place, go ahead and continue soldering down the line. On this particular material, I happen to know that it's a more fibrous plastic, and it doesn't ever seem to have any problems with melting. So I'm just going to go right down the line. Again, just in general for safety, it is better to jump around when you're soldering on something like this. Long component chain. Okay, you'll notice on the back of the board here, all of the pins are marked as to what they do for an LCD. Specifically for a 44780 compatible LCD. Now we're not going to use all of the data pins. We're only going to use the top four, D4 through 7. So we're going to be running it in nibble mode. Okay. So then we should be able to just get that on there. We still have a little bit of room. And the display is at a pretty good height. Just drop a switch in there real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. It's a little bit taller than the switch, but that's fine. We'll be able to see it. Okay, so moving on, let's go ahead and solder the rest of the Arduino headers on here. I'm going to go ahead and gently pry this LCD panel back off, probably bending most of the pins as I do it. So let's just make sure that we're on the right side here. So this is the front side, so we're going to put our pins in here to connect to the Arduino. And that is this row of pins right here. Again, I just want to snap that off at the correct number of pins. Yes, now there's a little bit of a gap right here between these two because the Arduino has a very strange pin layout. So we will actually do that as two separate headers, one there and one there. Okay, so flipping that over. And again, soldering it down. And again, we'll just pin one on each set and check the back. See, that's why we do that, because this is way out. Come on. There we go. And actually, that's kind of the dumb way of doing this. The smart way to do it is to just go ahead and plug it into the Arduino. And notice, by the way, that this Arduino has some extra pins up here on this part of the header that were not there on the original Arduino spec and are not used in this particular application. So this plugs in here. The joy of plugging things in with one hand. So that way we can just kind of verify that the alignment will be fine. And also that's going to heat sink the pens a little bit, so we probably don't need to worry too much about jumping around. We can just go ahead and get her done. Run down this row and go ahead and solder these in place. Okay. And you'll notice that these are also labeled according to what they do. These are connected to the switch. This is the data pins for the LCD, and then across here as well. And then this is RX and TX from the Arduino, which we won't actually be using in this application. And if I had been smart, I would have put in the headers on the other side, because now I'm going to have to pull it apart again. So learn from my mistakes. And I'm trying to remember here if the same number of headers are on each of these. That one is the same. This one there's more. Okay. And they've put an extra one in. Oh no. Okay. So there's just a couple of extra ones over here on this side. I'm not sure why they did that, but okay. One but two off of this one. So that goes there. And we'll need another stick to go in here. All right. When you do it, just put all the headers in there first and then put the board on top. You can kind of wiggle it around a bit to get it to drop in place. There we go. Okay, and now we can solder those. Oops. You'll notice the thing with the soldering here is that I can go really quick because this iron is at extreme heat. It's turned up as high as it can go. It's very, very, very hot. And I get on the pin and get off the pin very quickly. Alright, that takes care of all of that. 20K little trim pot that will fit in there very nicely. This is probably a lot nicer than what we really need. Since typically you adjust the LCD contrast once and you're done. I generally would use a tiny little cheap trim plot like this, but I don't have one in the right values. You want something that's like 10K or 20K. This is a 5K, so I'm not going to use that. Like I said, this is nicer than what we need. One of the nice things about the Bob is that the location for the trim pot here supports a wide variety of different pin arrangements. So in this case, it's really easy to just drop that in place. And what that's doing is forming a little bridge between ground and 5 volts. And then the center wiper puts out no voltage for the contrast on the LCD that can be adjusted. Okay, so let's get one pin down and verify that we're set up pretty close to correctly. Looks good. Okay. Go ahead and solder in the other side. And the wiper way over here. Okay, that looks good. LCD panel goes back on and fits just nicely right next to it. That should be the whole thing. All we have to do is drop this back in place on the Arduino. One thing I want to do is put just a little bit of electrician's tape or something across this top of this connector. And the only reason for doing that is just to make absolutely certain that the metal body of the connector doesn't hit the board. This board comes a little bit further to the left than most do, and so just to be absolutely safe, I'm going to drop that in. The RW signal right here for the 44780 LCD panels is read-write. So you could hook that up to a microcontroller and have it pulled, I think, high if you want to read back from the LCD panel to the microcontroller. But there just isn't any reason to do that, certainly not in this application. So what we're going to do is just take this pin right here. The board does not connect that pin back to the microcontroller. So what we're going to do is just ground it. Just so happens that there is another very handy-dandy header space over here. And that pin right there is RW. The W is a little bit cut off by this regulator. And that is ground. So we are just going to put a little jumper in there, and that is going to solve that problem. Okay, so we're just going to strip a little piece of wire here. And instead of trying to do it like that, just grab onto it with a pair of pliers and pull the other side off. And that'll give us something to hold it with when we bend down the leads. Okay. That looks more or less right. And then that's going to go in here between these two pins on the outside edge, which are ground, and the third one down, which is RW. Maybe. Maybe, maybe not. Half of the problem with building electronics is the mechanical issues of getting wires to go where you want them to go. Okay, are we in the right holes there? No, we are not. We're in the fourth one down, not the third one down. That's why that didn't want to fit. Squeezing it together a little bit more. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay. That is why we invented pliers, for holding small things. It would have almost been easier to use a little piece of header and then just put a wire across the top of it. Get in there. Okay. And if that doesn't fall out, we can go ahead and solder it in place. So make sure I'm in the right one, right? So we're doing ground on the one side. Jeez. Okay, that's good enough. And we are doing RW on the other side. Okay. So that should take care of it. A little trimming with the bias cut pliers. Okay, so now on our little patch panel right here, we're just going to put in a couple of patch wires, C4 to A0, A0 being right here, C4 being right here, and then we're going to go from C5 over to that hole right. So, quick review. We've jumpered A0 to C4, C5 to the top of JP5 right there. We have a little contrast control pot in, a little riser for the LCD panels. We've just popped our switches in. Those actually don't need to be soldered. They just pop in very nicely and can be held by spring tension. You can solder them on if you need to. We've jumpered the RW to ground, and that's it. Let's go ahead and drop in the LCD panel. Again, you can also just solder that on. Line up the Arduino to the shield. Pop that on. Drop in a little bit of power. And I've actually already loaded the sketch in this, so you'll see it when it comes up. Little hello world. And then it shows off the character positions. Now, this 0 that's coming up right here at this position, this is showing the state of the switches. So there's switch 1 being pushed, there's switch 2, there's switch 3, which puts out a 4. And the reason that's a 4 is because I'm doing these in binary so they can be added together. So if I push both of those, then we get a 6. If I push all 3 of the bottom ones, which I can't do with one hand, we get a 7. So this is switch 8 over here, switch 4 on the labels, but it's putting out an 8 just because of the way the sketch is written. And if you push them all, you get a 15. So that way you can read all the different ones. And that's it working. Sketch is on the web page. Pretty cheap and easy little thing.